This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Heather Sells. Just days before the midterm election, President Trump tells CBN News that he believes the blue wave is dead. The commander-in-chief spoke with CBN's David Brody and Jenna Browder in his private office on Air Force One Wednesday. The president was headed to Florida as part of an 8-state campaign blitz right before next Tuesday's vote.
We are finally putting America first.
He is the Energizer president, going from rally to rally with just days left before the midterm elections. The mainstream media have been saying for months that a big blue Democrat wave is coming to wash over Trump and his party. But aboard Air Force One in his private office, the president told CBN's Jenna Browder and me that he's not buying it.
We're just a few days away from the midterms. How are you feeling, and what do you think about this so-called blue wave?
Well, I think the blue wave is dead, frankly, and I think we're doing very well. It looks like we're going to win the Senate, which is very important.
Mr. President, what about Nancy Pelosi's comments? She's already kind of spiking the football with "we will win, we will win." What do you make of some of that?
Well, I haven't seen her comments. I know that, look, she's been losing for a long time, so, she would like to win. She hasn't been doing too well. We'll see what happens. I think we're going to do very well in the House also.
Our trip aboard Air Force One was a virtual whirlwind. At our stop in Florida, we went backstage for a glimpse of the calm before the Trump campaign storm.
The President of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
And as usual, the president was in rare form.
Who voted? Who voted? Oh, wow. Everybody voted already?
Here on the ground in Florida, the energy for President Trump and his Republican candidates is palpable. And so is that drained swamp anger.
Yeah, and I would also say that he is dishing out the red meat, as we know. He does it all the time at these rallies. So the question is civility, or, as his critics say, lack thereof. It's something we discussed with him on Air Force One. We've heard so much about hostility and incivility, and the media has been on you, as this just in, the media has been on you. What kind of role do you believe that you play? Do you feel like you have any responsibility in this whatsoever?
Well, I think the media is extremely unfair. It has been from the time I announced. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I'm Republican, I'm conservative, many other reasons, and probably me too.
He specifically believes that they breed dissension by unfairly covering events like his trip to the scene of the synagogue shooting.
We had a great day. It was so respectful of the office of president. And if you got home and if you read the New York Times or the Washington Post, or if you saw any of the networks, you would say it was violence, it was riots. I mean, it was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And everybody that was on that trip agreed with us. It was so wrong what they did. It was so phony.
There are people kind of following up on that who like to call you anti-Semitic, who like to call you a racist, Mr. President. What would you say to these people?
Well, the word racist is used about every Republican that's winning. Anytime a Republican is leading, they take out the R word, the racist word. And I'm not anti-immigrant at all. I'm all for people coming into the country legally and people based on merit. But when you see a caravan that's pouring up to our country with thousands of people, maybe 10,000 people now, look, we're not going to let them come into our country. We have 10, and we might even go up to 15,000 soldiers on our border. We are building a wall in its own way. We're putting up walls of barbed wire. And when you look at what we're doing, they're just not coming into our country. They might as well go back now. But take a look at the violence that they've created down there, the level of I mean, these are not angels, as you would say. These are not angels.
You say you're not going to let him into the country. What is this about tent cities? And that could be a tricky situation.
Well, we're going to build housing. Obviously, it has to be built very fast. And we're going to give them better housing than many of them have. We're going to hold them. We are not going to release them. We're going to hold them until their deportation hearing goes and their asylum hearings.
No catch and release, right?
No, we're not going to do catch and release. Catch and release is no good. Obama proved that.
As issues like immigration get touchy at times for some, evangelicals continue to stick with this president. The question for Trump is, will they do so even though he's not on the ballot next Tuesday?
Well, they're going to show up for me because nobody's done more for Christians or evangelicals or, frankly, religion than I have. You see all the things that we've passed, including the Johnson Amendment and so many things that we've nullified. Nobody's done more than we have. Mexico City, take a look at that. Things that, frankly, until Ronald Reagan, I mean, nobody did anything. So I know they're very happy with me. We've seen they're very happy. The question is whether or not they're going to go out and vote when I'm not running. I have no doubt they're going to be there in 20. I hope they're going to be there now because it'll be a lot easier if they are, a lot better.
There are a lot of folks praying for you out there. We hear this all the time. You and Mike Pence hear this all the time. How has that moved you? Because a lot of people think, the empathy factor with you as president is on the low end, if you will.
I don't think they do think that. I think they think
the
it's
critics
on the high
think
end.
that. The critics.
Well, maybe the critics say it because they're doing anything to get us all out of office. No, I think we've had tremendous support in the form of prayer. And I get it all the time. I'm praying for you, Mr. President. I'm praying for you. I hear it so much. It's nice. And it's great to see it and it's great to hear it. But all the time, people are coming up to me and they're saying, Mr. President, I'm praying for you. It's very nice.
While President Trump appreciates the prayers, he will be looking for votes to carry him and his party over the finish line next week. With Jenna Browder aboard Air Force One, David Brody, CBN News.
And David joins us now with more on that interview. David, the president granted you an interview just days before the election, and the first issue he brought up was immigration. He's clearly talking to evangelicals when he speaks with you. Why do you think he went to immigration first?
Well, not only did he go to it first, but we spent close to half that interview talking about immigration. There's a lot of different reasons. And I have to tell you, one of the questions I asked him straight up about that was, look, there are a lot of folks that say you're just bringing this up to gin up the base. And honestly, he didn't deny it. He didn't say I am, but he also didn't deny it, which I thought was interesting. Look, I thought some of the interesting parts of this were when I asked him about 10 cities, when we talked about 10 cities, and he said, we're going to build housing. Leave it to a builder to say we're going to build housing. That's how he termed it. So I just thought some of that was interesting. He's not going to do catch and release, and he's very adamant. Look, there's so much going on with Donald Trump about ginning up the space on immigration. And while there's a political element at play here, there's no doubt about it. Let's also be very clear. He's been talking this way for a very long time. So to think this is something that he's just doing for his base, I think would not see the full picture.
Well, it is interesting in the full picture because he seems to speak in two ways about immigrants. In the past, he has said he loves dreamers. Yesterday, he said, I'm not anti-immigrant. But then he does seem to stoke fear and talk about the horrors of illegal immigration. So how do you understand him when he seems to speak in such different ways about immigration?
That's a great question, Heather. I would say this. Look, covering him for a very long time, knowing him close to 10 years now, I can tell you this, that he's a guy that is ready to make a deal on immigration. Look, DACA, we know about DACA, and we also know that President Obama never codified it into law. I'm sure he wanted to, but it never got codified into law. Donald Trump is ready to do just that with Congress. He needs some Democrats, but they just don't want to give him the funding for the wall. And of course, he made that big campaign promise to build the wall. So look, this is a president who will do a deal on immigration. He's not this rock rib Republican this just in. We know that. But Democrats are just stubborn, just like he is, by the way, in terms of the wall funding. They won't do it. But if they would budget all on the wall funding, Donald Trump would be wheeling and dealing left and right on immigration. I don't think there's any question about it.
David, this is really a unique opportunity to be on Air Force One. What did you learn about the president, seeing him in that setting, seeing him behind the scenes at the rally?
It's a good question. Very comfortable, really kind of comfortable in his own skin, which we kind of knew about Donald Trump already, but he didn't seem anxious at all. He seemed like he was kind of fitting the mold of President of the United States more than he even did at the beginning, because, of course, CBN interviewed him, had a chance to interview him in the Blue Room of the White House the first week of his presidency, and it just seemed like he's just feeling more comfortable, more natural. He seemed very at ease. He was kind of joking around. Yes, that's right, joking around a little bit, and just felt in a good place at this point, and he loves these rallies. They energize him. like never before. We had some backstage access, which was nice to see him in a different environment. And once again, when he's talking to Rick Scott behind the scenes, the governor of Florida running for the Senate seat against Bill Nelson, it wasn't like he was slapping the guy and on the back and all happy. He was very Donald Trump, law and order, serious. I mean, that's just the way he is. It's the way he operates behind the scenes and in front of the camera. And to a degree, Heather, that's what makes him pretty endearing to his deplorable, in air quotes, his deplorable base.
Right. Well, he does seem in his element in those rallies. David Brody, thanks for your thoughts. Thanks,
Heather.
Well, Pastor Samuel Rodriguez is president of the National Hispanic Christian Leadership Conference. It oversees 40,000 churches in the U.S., and he joins us now to talk about the midterm election and immigration. Pastor Sam, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The president is very clearly making immigration a top campaign issue. Many people think he is deliberately stoking fear to get out the vote. What are your thoughts?
Well, we could do better. Look, you can't deny the fact there's a political calculus in the president engaging the immigration rhetoric. Indeed, I actually support the president in the idea of building a wall, stopping all illegal immigration. I have personal great angst regarding the 14,000 plus individuals in this caravan. Completely aware that there are those from the hard left from Honduras that actually initiated this caravan, and that 70% of those that are coming forward are not women with children, they're actually single males. Not all of them are bad people. I would argue the vast majority of good, God-fearing people looking for a better life, but it's part of a political calculus stemming from Central America. So I have great angst about 14,000 people coming to our borders. I want people to come here legally, not illegally. But with that being said, it's right midterm elections, and it's activating the base on the issue of immigration. And so I have a bit of angst, a little bit of acid reflux in engaging this strategy. In addition to the birthright citizenship right about now, it's a viable conversation to have, but I don't want to stoke the worst out of America. This president could actually run on one amazing platform, the lowest unemployment rate in a generation, the lowest unemployment rate ever for Hispanics and African Americans, the best GDP we have seen in over a decade. There are so many positive deliverables and metrics that this president and the RNC, for that matter, could really elevate to the next level. They can really push an agenda that really speaks to positivism rather than engaging the fear component.
Well, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that you have angst and heartburn over this discussion. What about the birthright citizenship conversation, though? I mean, I'm surprised to hear you giving any leeway at all on that. I would think you'd be completely opposed.
No, I'm completely opposed if it requires a constitutional amendment. I am one of those. Don't touch the Constitution. If you touch the Constitution, and if you touch this constitutional amendment, the 14th Amendment, what other amendments are up to play somewhere in the future? So I have great concern with anything that requires a constitutional amendment. At the same time, there is a bit of ambiguity. Heather, how do we deal with the fact that, yes, there is a legitimate concern? There are people, here it is, there are people that actually come into America illegally for the purpose of giving birth, for their children to become legal citizens, and for that to emerge as some sort of a continuum of individuals coming in here with the initial entry being one that's illegal in nature. How do we do that? How do we reconcile the fact that we are a sovereign nation committed to protecting our borders? We can't be embracing the idea of anarchy or chaos. We are a sovereign nation. So how do we do that? So I am not in favor of ending birthright citizenship. It may be one of those elements that makes us exceptional. I know that the UK doesn't have it and New Zealand doesn't have it and the major developed nations with the exception of Canada and the US. I understand that. But there is a conversation to be had. How can we protect legal and naturalized people to make sure legal immigrants and naturalized individuals, if they give birth in this nation, their children should be citizens. Yeah. But how can we likewise build a firewall against the birthing industry and so forth?
It's complicated. Let me just ask you, given all these hot butt immigration issues, and we just have a short time here, but do you think this is going to help or deter in terms of get out the vote with Latino voters?
I don't know if it's going to help, to be honest. I don't know if the immigration rhetoric is going to help. If the idea would have been the lowest unemployment rate in Hispanic American history, that may have helped. the immigration may actually sway some Latinos to say, hey, I'm going to ride this one. I'm not going to participate in this midterm election. And it's unfortunate because I would like to see more Latino go out there and vote and participate in our electoral process.
Right. All right. Pastor Sam Rodriguez, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up, socialism has taken a hit in countries like Venezuela, yet it grows in popularity among Democrats and many young Americans. A closer look when we come back. The Democratic Party is taking on more ideas from socialism, and their ideas young voters tend to favor more and more. Gallup found in research over the summer that 57% of Democrats have a positive view of socialism, while only 47% have a positive view of capitalism. Now, the White House has released a report to highlight the realities of socialism, and here to discuss it is David Burton, the Heritage Foundation Senior Fellow for Economic Policy. David, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be with you.
You know, it's really interesting to me that the White House must be significantly concerned about socialism to release a report on it. What's your take on that?
Well, there's no doubt that the media has given great attention to self-described socialists and that it's receiving more and more attention and more support. I think that support is almost certainly a function of ignorance, particularly in the part of young people. Socialism is not a new or exciting idea. It's an idea that's been out there for almost 2 centuries and been tried for at least 100 years. And it has a very well-defined record. It's been tried roughly 70 times, and it's failed 70 times.
Yeah, talk about, we hear a lot about Venezuela, and the report talks about that country. How have you seen socialism contribute to the decline there?
Well, socialism, when it's tried seriously, results in mass poverty. It does that with alarming predictability, whether it's the Soviet Union or Maoist China or North Korea or Venezuela. But even places where you get socialism light, it results in a marked reduction in the standard of living of the country that adopts it.
It also, the report does note what some call success in Nordic countries for socialism. Talk about what has happened in those nations with socialism through the years.
Well, socialism was tried, really social democracy, socialism light, was tried in Scandinavian countries in the 70s and early 80s, and it failed. And those countries are now, by a wide variety of measures, freer than the United States. The Heritage Foundation's Index of Economic Freedom shows that they're freer than the United States, some of the economically freest countries in the world. And that's why they're successful. Other measures, such as the Canadian Fraser Institute, show the same thing. Those countries are not socialist. The Danish Prime Minister came out and made that clear a couple months ago. They're market economies, and they're very free by European standards.
Where do you see this trend going on, this political trend towards socialism, given the track records of these countries where it has really flourished and then they have declined?
Well, I think there's a major need for organizations like Heritage and other organizations that are interested in facts to explain the facts to the public and to young people. Socialism has been tried many, many times, and it's failed. But the other thing that I think is often forgotten is it's unethical. It basically boils down to granting control over your economic life to government, to politicians, rather than allowing people to make their own decisions.
All right. Well, David Burton, fascinating that the White House is addressing this directly, and we appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Sure.
With efforts to allow people to choose how they identify sexually in states across the nation, the Department of Health and Human Services is reportedly seeking to narrow the definition to fit the biological markers of male and female at birth. Here is Charlene Aaron.
The Trump administration is seeking to define gender as the biological condition determined at birth as either male or female. Conservatives praise the move.
For the Trump administration to stand firm to say that sex-based discrimination really is only gender-based, biologically male and female, is not only consistent with science, but it's consistent with the traditional definition that we've had as a country and understood as a country throughout our history.
A report in the New York Times cites a Department of Health and Human Services memo seeking to establish a legal definition of gender under Title IX. That's the civil rights law that bans discrimination on the basis of sex. HHS is proposing a person's gender be defined by the genitalia they're born with and can't be changed. LGBT activists are furious, calling it an attack on transgender Americans.
Making clear that we will not stand to see the human rights of transgender people erased by this administration from federal law. We have seen so many attacks by the Trump-Pence administration against transgender people, and it is not okay.
The Obama administration loosened the legal concept of gender, recognizing it as an individual choice and not one determined at birth. That created legal and moral challenges concerning transgender access to bathrooms, dormitories, and single-sex programs that were once defined strictly by male or female.
There are sexual predators out there that will take advantage of this. The reason why we keep males and females separated is to prevent problems. But now you're saying, oh no, there's no problem.
Many see the proposed new definition as restoring reason and common sense in the face of a wave of social change generated by a vocal minority.
For the LGBT community to attempt, again, to try to create certain rights that are not present within sex-based discrimination, they're attempting to draw a distinctly protected class that really should not properly or scientifically or biologically fall under the definition of sex-based discrimination.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Well, for children and their parents sorting through all the loot from trick-or-treating this Halloween, the question is what to do with the unwanted candies. And Reese's has a solution, a vending machine where folks could toss in the unwanted lollipops and chewy bites, whatever, for a Reese's cup or two. It's called a candy converter. The makers of the chocolate and peanut butter treat say a survey found 90% of Americans say they wish they could trade their unwanted Halloween candy. And you can find more news at cbnnews.com and tell us what you think by emailing newswatch@cbn.com or talk to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you'll join us next time. Have a great day.